Hi, it's Katie from Katie Cooks and Crafts, and this tutorial will show you how to make these very basic thumbless baby mittens. You can use these for no scratch mittens or use them in cold weather to keep little babies' hands warm. These are done in the spiral, so there are no seams and they're really easy to whip up. They are made pretty much entirely with just single crochet. There's a few half double crochets, and then of course you need to know how to do chain as well. But I'll walk you through each of those steps to make these. This pattern is very similar to another baby mitten, thumbless baby mitten that I made before. If you want to check that out, it's the same sort of concept. It's just done with two different colors that spiral around. So if you want striped mittens, be sure to check that video out. I will link that down below. If you want to see the written pattern for this tutorial, I will link that down below. You can check out my blog where I have this pattern as well as a bunch of different crochet patterns. They're all free, so be sure to check that out as well. And let's get started. I'm going to start by putting a slip knot onto my hook and tightening it down. And I'm going to chain 4. So chain number 1, chain 2, chain 3, and chain 4. So there are the 4 chains. Zoom in. So we'll count from the hook. This is the first chain from the hook. We're going to skip the first chain from the hook. So it's going to actually be the turning chain. We won't be working into this at all. We're going to start at the second chain from the hook, which is right here. So this is the top loop and this is the bottom loop. And then the next chain, the top loop, bottom loop, and the next chain, top loop, and bottom loop. So when we start, we're going to go this direction, and we're going to work in the top loops only. So here, then here, then here. Then we'll come around here and do the other loop here, and here, and here. And that will bring us back to the beginning, and we'll go around again. So we're not going to join our rounds and start new rounds. We're just going to continuously spiral. So you won't have any seams, and it will be just one continuous spiral. So we're going to start in the second chain from the hook. We're going to go into the top loop. We're going to put 2 single crochets here. The next chain in the top loop we'll put 1 single crochet, and then in the last chain here in the top loop we'll put 2 single crochets. Then we'll come around this side, we'll put 2 in this other loop of this chain, 1 in this one, and 2 in this one. So we're basically adding 2 extra stitches to the ends here. So we'll have 1 extra stitch here at the top loop, and then when we come all the way around we'll have an extra stitch here in the bottom loop. Same thing for this end. When we come to this loop we will add an extra stitch here, and then here we'll also add an extra stitch. So that's why we're doing 2 single crochets in these stitches and only 1 in these loops here. So the 1 stitch is actually going to count for the side, and the 2 stitches where the increase are is going to be the end. So as we add rounds to this and it gets larger and larger, those side stitches will become more stitches there. So we're starting with just this one, where we'll have just 1 stitch in the side, and then the ends will always do our increases, 2 extra stitches in each end for every round, and that's where this is going to increase. So if you look at your hand, the mitten will start here, just right about here, and it will expand and expand and increase and increase. And once you get about here, which is about 1/3 of the mitten, then we're just going to go straight down, since the hand sort of goes straight after that. So to do the increases, like I said, all you have to do is do 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So you'll have 2 single crochets in 1 stitch. The first single crochet will count for the stitch. The second single crochet will be your extra stitch or your increase. Okay, so hopefully that's not too much information. I don't want to confuse you. I'm just trying to explain where all of these stitches are coming into play. So with all that said, now I'm actually going to do what I just said and show you. So this first chain is the chain that we're going to skip. This second chain from the hook is where we're going to work. So we'll put 2 single crochets in the top loop of the second chain from the hook. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. So we'll put our second single crochet in that same spot. So you insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. Okay, so now we're at the second chain of these 3 chains we're going to be working into. So we're going to just put 1 single crochet in that next chain in the top loop only. And then in the next chain in the top loop only, we're going to put the 2 single crochets. Okay, so it looks like that. You put 2 single crochets, and then 1 in the next, and then 2 in the third one. So it looks like that. And to do the second half of this first round, you just turn your whole work upside down, and now we're working in that other loop, which is, now that we've turned it upside down, is now the top loop, but I just call it the other loop. So in the first stitch you come to in the other loop, we're going to put 2 single crochets. So if I could get my hook in there. Okay, so yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, insert your hook in the same spot, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. Now when you're working in both loops of this last stitch, it might get pulled. See how it's pulled a little large like that? Just take your short tail, so this is your short tail, and just give it a little tug to tighten that back down. And now we'll just continue. In the next stitch, in the other loop, we're going to put 1 single crochet. Make sure you get just that other loop. And then in the last chain, in the other loop of the last chain, we'll put 2 single crochets. Okay, and then like I said, we're back where we started from. So I'm just going to keep going here and go around and around and around. But let's look at what we have here. I have an extra stitch here where I put 2 stitches in the same stitch, and an extra stitch here, an extra stitch here, and an extra stitch here. So that's 2 stitches here and 2 stitches here. And that will give us our increase. And then when we went down the side for this first row, it was just 1 stitch. That was just 1 stitch in the center there. So this is the end of round 1. And you don't really need to use stitch markers or count rows or count stitches really even, because we're just going to kind of assess things as we go to know where we are. So we're going to start round 2. So I'm going to start by working in this first stitch that I did. This is the very first stitch I did. That's the first single crochet that I made on this project. So we're going to just keep going right into that stitch. And so we're at the end. I need to make sure I'm doing my increases. So I had an increase here and an increase here. That was for round 1. Now I'm on round 2, so I need to do an increase here. And that will give me 1 extra stitch, and the second increase on this end will happen after I come all the way around, and I'll work an extra stitch here. So for a short while there'll just be 1 increase in this end for round 2, but we'll get it at the end. So let me see if I can show you. This is the first stitch, so just turn your work like that so you can see the 2 loops that you need to work under. Insert your hook under both loops just like you were crocheting into any regular stitch. So as far as top loop and bottom loop, we're not worried about that anymore. That was just for the first row or the first round. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. Then we'll put our second single crochet in that stitch for the first increase on that end. So now we're going to go down the long side, and there's no increases on the long side, so we're just going to put 1 stitch in each stitch down the long side. So for the first round we just had the 1 stitch, but now as it's growing our sides are getting a little longer. So instead of just 1, we actually have 3 stitches that we're going to work 1 stitch into each of those 3 stitches. 1 single crochet all the way down that long side. And then you'll come to another short end. So let me zoom in. It's not necessary to count necessarily. What you're just going to do is you're just going to hold your work straight up and down, and you're going to pick 2 stitches that are closest to the end, the very tippity top, and you just pick 2 of the topmost stitches, and that's where you're going to put your increases. So I'm going to put my first increase here in this stitch, and my second increase here in this stitch. Now if you look, it's actually this stitch and this stitch, so it's sort of kind of slanted, but that's the best I can do. And when I come around again, I will recenter, reassess, and it'll eventually just sort of balance out. So it's not super critical. If you go a little bit off to the side, your pattern will still turn out perfectly fine. And it's a lot easier than trying to keep track of what row you are and use stitch markers and all that. You're just going to look at your work and it'll tell you where to put your increases. So in this first end stitch, I'm going to put 2 single crochets. And in this second end stitch, I'll put 2 single crochets. So that's our 2 extra stitches in the end, and now we've come to a long side again. So we'll just put 1 stitch in each of these stitches down the long side until we come to the short end again. Okay, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. So here we're at the short end. I have these 2 stitches that seem to be the topmost or the endmost stitches, so that's where I'm going to put my increases. So we're just going to keep spiraling around doing the same thing. So putting 2 single crochets in the 2 endmost stitches for your increases, which is what I have just done. And then as you come down the long side, we'll just stitch 1 single crochet in each stitch down the long sides with no increases. Okay, we find ourselves at another short end, so this stitch and this stitch will be where I'm going to put my increases. So 1, 2, and 1, 2. Then down this long sides, just 1 single crochet in each stitch down the long sides. And you're just going to continue to do this around and around and around until your the tip of your mitten is the appropriate size. So for these baby mittens, I have counted 20 stitches to be the size that I make mine. If you want to make yours a little bit bigger, then just keep adding more rows until you have more than 20 stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and count. So I'll zoom in, because sometimes counting can be difficult if you don't know what exactly you're counting. Okay, so this is the loop. I took my hook out. My hook would have been in this loop. That does not count as a stitch. This is your most recently completed stitch. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And then this stitch is worked into, so it doesn't count. So I have 17 stitches. So I'm going to continue at that same pattern until I have 20 stitches. So I need 3 more increases. So I'll have 2 here, and then I'll go down this the long side, and then I'll do 1 here, and then I will have my 20 stitches. Okay, so here I am at my short end. I'll do an increase here and a second increase here. Then I'll work down the long side okay, and I'll just do the one last increase here. So if you remember on round 2, we started with an increase and we needed to come back around. So then round 3 came around, then round 4 came around. So this is the last increase. So now I have 20 stitches, and that would be the top of a mitten, if you can imagine my hand much smaller. So you can see how it's flared out a little bit here, and that's just the taper. So this running along the tip is the beginning foundation chain. So it should lay just like that and sort of flare out to make the tip of the mitten. So from here, it's very simple. You're just going to continue, but instead of having these increases to flare this out, you're just going to continue without increases. So just spiral around and around and around, putting one stitch in each stitch all the way around. So instead of flaring out, it'll just go straight. So if you look at it this way, you can see the sides, they don't necessarily flare out. Now there'll be a little bit of flaring from the ends, but they're going pretty much straight down, whereas these ones are jutting out. That's because on the sides we didn't do increases. Okay, so all you have to do is put one stitch in each stitch all the way around until your mitten is as long as you like. So I'm just going to go around and around, one stitch, one single crochet in each stitch. Okay, and I'm coming towards my short end, but that doesn't matter. I'm just going to keep putting one stitch in each stitch all the way around, not doing increases anymore. So I will do several rows of just one stitch in each, one single crochet in each stitch, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, so I have done several rows. I didn't even count. It's not necessary to count, but you just want to add rows and rows and rows of just one single crochet in each stitch, and you can see how it's more straight up and down. So here was where the increasing happened, and then I did just straight up and down, so it sort of mirrors the natural shape of your baby's hand. So you just want to keep working until your total mitten is either 3 or 3.5 inches, depending on the age of your baby, and this should cover their hand. And now we're going to make a drawstring and then a little cuff so that you can pull it over the baby's hand and snug it up right against their wrist. So to do that, we're going to do an eyelet row that we can lace a drawstring through. So you want to stop here on the side. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I think it just makes it look a little neater. And what we're going to do is we're going to chain one, and we're going to skip the next stitch. We'll skip this stitch here and we'll work into the next stitch. So we're going to put a half double crochet in the next stitch. This is just a stitch that's just a little bit taller than a single crochet, but it's not as tall as a double crochet. So to do a half double crochet, you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch you want to work into, yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. And with that chain one and then that taller stitch, you have your first hole. So once you have your first hole, you're going to chain one, you're going to skip a stitch, and working in the next stitch, you're going to put another half double crochet. Like that. And that will be the second hole. Just repeat that around. So chain one, skip a stitch, half double crochet into the next stitch, and you can see a row of holes is forming. So we'll just do this all the way around. Okay, so this is my last hole. You want to go all the way around. This was my first hole, this is my last hole. So they're not exactly on the same row, because when you're spiraling around, each row is going to be a little bit higher than the next row. They don't match up evenly, but once you get the drawstring in there, it won't be noticeable. So I mean, that's just one of the things you have to work around when working in the spiral crochet. So that is the eyelet row, and since we worked into every other stitch, you should have 10 holes, and you want an even number of holes so that you can lace your thread for your drawstring in and out, and you'll come out where the other one went in, if that makes sense. But just make sure you have 10 holes around. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so once we have the 10 holes and we've come all the way back around again, we're just going to make another few rows just to make a little cuff. That will just keep the baby's wrist warm, and it'll help this not fall off as easily. So when we come around on this row, we're not going to be working directly into the stitches. We're going to be working in the spaces made by these chain ones. So these holes, where we're going to lace our drawstring through, we're going to work in those holes instead of in the stitch. So what we'll do is we'll just, so this last stitch that we did was the last half double crochet to form the 10th hole. So now we're just going to work in this, around this chain, and we're going to put 2 single crochets in that hole, in that space around the chain. Then in the next space we will put 2 single crochets, and then in the next space we'll put 2 single crochets. So we have 10 holes, we're putting 2 single crochets in each hole. That will bring us back to our 20 single crochets around, which is what we originally had when we did these sides here. So just finish putting 2 single crochets in each of the chain 1 spaces. Okay, so I've come to my last hole, I put my last 2 single crochets, so your mitten looks like this. So now I'm going to add 3 or 4 more rows here, just to make sort of a longer cuff, and I'm going to flare the cuff out a little bit, just so that it's a little bit easier to slide baby's hand into. It'll make sort of a funnel for their hand to go down into the mitten. So we're going to increase again here, sort of like we increased here. So I'm going to put an extra stitch here and an extra stitch here, and just go around, like I said, 3 or 4 rows. So here I am on this side. So again, your mitten is flat. This was your beginning chain. You have your flaring out here. So we'll flare out a little bit here and here. So on these sides, sort of the short ends, but it's not really the short ends anymore, I'm going to just do an increase. So I'll just do in this first stitch here that I'm going to work into, I will increase. So I'll just do 2 single crochets in that stitch, and then 1 in each of the next stitches until I get to that other side. So going along the long end here, 1 stitch in each of these single crochets, so single crochet in each of the single crochets, and then here we are on the other side, so I'm going to put an increase here. So I will just do 2 single crochets in the next stitch. Then we'll go along this side again by just putting 1 single crochet in each stitch. And then just repeat that, like I said, 2 or 3 or 4 more times, depending on how long you want the cuff. So as I come to that side again, I will put another increase, so 1 and then 2 in the same stitch. You can see it's flaring out a little bit. And then 1 stitch, 1 single crochet in each stitch down the side. So I think this is probably a long enough cuff. You can see how the cuff is flaring out a little bit. I just think it makes it easier to get it on the baby's hand. I'll do 1 more row. So we'll increase here on the side and go around again just to make it a little bit longer. That's totally up to you. You could make it longer or shorter, but I do think at least a couple rows will help the mitten stay on the hand. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Zoom out just a little bit. Alright, so once you have the mitten finished and the cuff as long as you want, to finish off spirals, since you don't have really an ending point, all I do is, so this last stitch was a single crochet, I've been doing single crochets around, I'm just going to make a step down. So we're going from a single crochet, the next smaller stitch is just a slip stitch. If you were going from a taller stitch from a spiral work, you would go, say, from a double crochet to a half double crochet to a single crochet to a slip stitch, just to sort of make that more of a gradual ending. But since this single crochet is pretty short of a stitch anyway, there's only 1 stitch that's any shorter, and that's just a slip stitch. So in the next stitch I'll do a slip stitch. Insert your hook, yarn over, and pull through everything. And that's essentially finishing off your mitten. So I just do one extra chain, pull up a long loop, clip your yarn, pull that through, and tighten it down. Okay, so there is the body of your mitten. You'll need to hide this end as well as this end here. So if you can see, there's sort of a seam where your beginning chain, since you worked on both loops, it kind of pulls it a little bit more open than I would like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this tail. When I hide the tail, I'm going to just go over that and sort of reinforce it. So you can really do this any way that you like, but all I'm going to do is, since I have to hide this end anyway, I'm just going to kind of weave it in back and forth, going over that sort of vulnerable area, just to help block the cold from getting in and to strengthen that seam. So basically you just want to take your tapestry needle and just weave this tail in through some stitches. You want to go in many different directions, change directions, and just basically bury this tail. Okay, and once you have it sufficiently buried, then any excess you'll just trim off. Okay, put that back right side out. And then as far as this tail, you want to do the same thing, just sort of weave it in through some stitches just to hide the end. So I'll go up through some stitches like that. Go back same direction I just came from, turn, go the other direction, just sort of go in erratic directions, just so if you go all in the same direction it'll more easily pull out. Since baby items tend to be washed a lot, you want to make these ends nice and secure. Okay, so once that end is secure, just before I clip my tail, just give it a little tug, because you don't want to be pulling it tight. You don't want to like cinch up this area, so just make sure that there's still a nice drape to the fabric. Clip that tail, and your mitten is done. So now what we need to do is make a drawstring. You could use ribbon, but I like to make a chain, or you could just braid some yarn. And if you do sort of a loose enough chain or a loose enough braid, then the yarn, sort of the stretch of the yarn is still there. So there's just a little bit of give, and I feel like that makes a more comfortable drawstring for around baby's delicate little wrists. So I'm just going to chain, and there's no, necessarily any number. You just want to chain until you have a drawstring that is long enough. And you can always shorten it, so go a little bit higher than you think. It's nothing worse than having a drawstring that's too short and you have to tie little bows and you don't have enough. So there's my drawstring, and you want it to be long enough that it can be fully extended and still have enough tails that it's not pulling in. So if you cinch this up, it'll be longer, but when you open it, you want the baby's wrist to be able to come out, but you don't want your tails to be falling out of the eyelet. So I think somewhere around here would be long enough. So I'll clip this thread and then pull that last loop through on your chain, and then I just do an overhand knot just to secure it. Okay, so an overhand knot there, clip your excess thread, it looks like that, And do the same thing on the back side. Okay. So there is your drawstring. And I usually, if the mittens on the baby's wrist, I usually have the bow here, so it's easy access for parents. So just take your drawstring, and I use my crochet hook. It makes it easier to sort of thread this through. So you just go in and out and in and out, like that. Over, under. Over, under. Over, under. Okay. And there is your drawstring. So you would just tighten it around baby's wrist, not too tight, and then just tie a bow. Like that. And that is your baby mitten all done. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and found it helpful. I would appreciate it if you could give my tutorial a thumbs up. If you make your project, I'd love to see pictures of it. You can always post your photos on my Facebook page. Links to all that will be down in the description box. So thanks so much for watching. Bye!